Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining in. So, in my weekly classes on Vedic astrology, I had spoken about, you know, how important it is to study the aspects of the planets. Okay, and today I'm going to discuss about the aspects of Surya Narayan, that is the sun. Okay. So, just to clear a few misconceptions, the sun is the most important planet in Vedic astrology because Surya decides our fate. Okay, and what it does is it also assigns positions to all other planets in our horoscope. Okay, so each of the 12 houses of the horoscope, it has its own Surya. Okay, for example, the sign of Gemini has its own Surya and its name is Mitraditya. Okay, the sign of Capricorn has its own Surya and it is known as Dhataditya. Okay, so every sign will have its own Surya, and Surya Narayan is, he is the determiner of our fate or our destiny, as we would like to call it. Okay, so aspects of any, any planet represent the desires of that planet. Okay, and every planet will aspect the seventh house from itself. All right, and although I personally think that Ketu does not have any aspects, but I'll still I'll still discuss Ketu's aspects in this in this series of aspects video. Okay, so again, as I said, every planet aspects the seventh house from itself. That means the seventh aspect is the most important aspect because it represents the 100% desire of any graha. Okay, and when it comes to Surya, okay, when it comes to Surya, it the seventh aspect, the seventh aspect of Surya, it gives an authoritative influence upon the planet or house where it is aspecting. And because the sun represents authority, because the sun represents dominance, that seventh aspect shows where the person would have responsibility and direction. Okay, it represents the absolute authority of that person in that particular area of aspect. And you know the sun's ability to give confidence, then ego and self-esteem, it transforms the house that it aspects. Okay, which is the which is the seventh house from itself. All right, so I'll take you through I'll take you through the sun in all, I'll take you through the positions of the sun in all the houses, and that would actually give you a brief idea of the of the aspects. All right, so the sun in the first house. Okay, so it is considered to be very, very good. Surya in the first house is considered to be very, very good. But then sun in the first house aspects the seventh house. Okay, that means the house of partnerships, the house of relationships. Okay, so what happens is, with this aspect on the seventh house, the sun will, will directly impact the spouse of the native. Okay, and it can be a good or a bad transformation for the partner because the sun represents ego and the person would also be bringing a lot of ego into the marriage. Okay, and there would be a constant need to dominate the partner and seek attention. Okay, and the other thing that the other thing that that must be mentioned here is that the partner would have the native rather would have a very high libido because the sun represents your sexual virility as well. Okay, so as I said, there would be a significant need to dominate the partner, and the native would actually feel that they are the they are the king and the partner is only a servant. Okay, but if the sun is if the sun is in Leo, or if the sun is exalted in Aries without any malefic without any malefic impacts, then this aspect of the sun can bring a partner who is truthful, who follows the authority, and who is highly spiritual, you know, because the sun also represents your spiritual practices. Okay. And the partner will have an ability to nourish the marriage. Okay. If the sun is well placed, or if the sun is exalted, or in its own sign. Okay. And, the spouse of this native will have leadership qualities to raise a family and then provide for the family as well. Okay. However, if the sun is debilitated, say around 5 to 12 degrees of Libra, which is the highest debilitation for the sun, it will show that the native will be very, very dominating towards the spouse, and can even, can even publicly insult or degrade them. Okay. And because the sun also represents the ego, a debilitated sun will make the native short tempered over small things, that can create a lot of arguments in the marriage. Okay. Now, sun in the second house, it will put an aspect on the eighth house. All right. So what happens is it shows a great deal of respect for the family. Okay, because the second house is family. So the sun in the second house will show a great deal of respect for the family. And what is the eighth house? The eighth house is the house of transformation. It is the house of occult. It is the house of death. It is also the house of the spouse's family. Okay. So because the sun has this great ability to illuminate, it will bring a great deal of interest in, in investigating for the government or working undercover for authorities. For example, the person might be interested in working for intelligence services like RAW or ISI or so on. Okay. And, the family of the spouse becomes a source of transformation. Okay. And because the sun is directly aspecting the eighth house, it actually helps the native to be very, very spiritual and to, to seek help from the occult or from other secret sources. Okay. And again, if the sun is exalted or in its own sign, then this aspect often brings wealth, status, and, an honor through the family of the spouse. All right. And what happens if the sun is debilitated? You know, the spouse family can create problems for the native, or rather the native can create problems for the spouse's family. Okay. And they can also, it can also produce natives who demand a lot of money, or maybe who demand a lot of resources, or rather dowry from the, from this family of the spouse. Okay. And the other thing is that if the sun is in good condition, that means it is, if it is aspected by benefics, or if it is in the sign of Leo, then the natives will be very, very devoted to their own family, and they will also help to increase the status of the spouse's family by providing different kinds of resources. Okay. Next, we have the sun in the third house. Okay. And since the third house is the house of skills, so the illuminating ability of the sun, it will give many skills to the native. Okay. And it can make one a great artist, a writer, okay, an engineer, an actor, a salesman, or even a government servant. Okay. So this is one position of the sun which is good for getting government jobs. All right. And because the sun is in the third house, it will directly aspect the ninth house. So what it means is that the native will try to serve a higher purpose through their skills. Okay. And because the ninth house represents teachers, gurus, universities, then the teachings of the father, okay, philosophy, higher education. So what happens is that the sun from the third house, the sun in the third house indicates that the native will be devoted to their teachers, to their fathers, and they will ardently follow the law of the land. Okay. However, the debilation of the sun will change the picture. Okay, because if the sun is debilitated in the third house, then its aspect on the ninth house will try to overthrow one's father or one's gurus. Okay, this is like how Aurangzeb overthrew Shah Jahan to assume the throne. Okay, so this is a condition similar to that. Okay, and if the sun is debilitated, or if it is aspected by by malefics, then the natives will feel threatened by higher authorities, and they will not follow the law of the land. Okay, and because the sun is aspecting the ninth house from the third house, if well placed, this sun can actually make the native a very good government administrator. Okay, but in most of the case, because because sun is also the significator of knowledge, so it gives a great inclination to the native towards higher education. Okay, and the native will also be very, very good regarding skills of hands, like engineering or sculpting or sales manager. Okay, and again, if the sun is exalted or in the sign of Leo, then the native will have tremendous respect, for the teachings of, of the father, or of government authorities, or even their guru. Okay, and they'll also, these natives will also be highly interested in, in studying the law, and becoming a source of light for higher teachings as well as for religious purposes. Okay. Then sun in the fourth house. So fourth house sun is not considered to be very, very good. Okay, the sun becomes dikshunya in the fourth house. Okay. However, since the sun is in the fourth house, it will aspect the 10th house. So what happens is that, the career of the native will be highly influenced by your mother, by your home and childhood. Okay. And the 10th house is the house of completing work. The 10th house is the house of status, honor. Okay, 10th house is also the house of the government and also relationship with one's father. Okay, so because the 10th house is the house of completing work, so this native will be very, very good at at completing work, because if the sun is in its own position or is exalted, it will give very good abilities for to the native to complete any form of work. Okay, and the fourth house, we know that it also represents the private life of of anyone. Okay, the life that you don't usually display on social media or before others, right? So what happens is, if the sun is in the fourth house, it means that the native was born at midnight, and this is the time when the world is asleep. So these people, they love domestic life most of the time, and the aspect of this fourth house sun on the 10th house shows that the native is highly inclined towards maybe having a work from home job or maybe a home based business. Okay, however, if the sun is exalted or if it is in Leo, then the native will be highly attached to your homeland and mother. Okay, and most often than not, in cases like this, the native's mother often plays or assumes the role of their father in life. Okay, and even if the sun is debilitated, this is true. Okay, the mother will have a very, very strong influence on your childhood. Okay, so if the sun is debilitated, what will happen is, one will be highly influenced by their mother, but at the same time they will have an ego clash with their mother. Okay, so but if the sun is debilitated, then the debilitated aspect on the 10th house, it can show a bad relationship with the father, and also a kind of dislike towards taking orders from the authority. Okay, so this is the sun in the fourth house, right? Then comes the sun in the fifth house, right? So this fifth house sun is the house, we know that the fifth house is the house of mantras. Okay, so the sun in the fifth house gives a very good inclination to the native to perform mantra based services or mantra based worship. The fifth house also represents children. Okay, it represents creativity, it represents romance and politics as well. So from the fifth house, the sun aspects the 11th house of network circles, gains, elder brothers and sisters, and also, one's goals. All right. So what happens is that this fifth house sun aspecting the 11th house reveals, can make the native very, very dominant over their professional network circles, over their friends and elder siblings. Okay, but because the sun is in the fifth house, so it will also brighten the quality of the fifth house. It will make the native more fun loving, it will make the native very creative, and it will give a very, very strong inclination towards sports and arts. Okay, however, because the sun also aspects the 11th house, so it also gives a great power to the native to to illuminate his path and achieve his goals, hopes and desires. Okay, and the native will have friends and network circles in very important places, which are most often connected to the government. Okay, and if it is exalted, it becomes it gives more it gives more results, and it also indicates favors from the government. All right, however, if the sun is debilitated, then the native will be more interested in arts. Okay, more interested in cinema or acting or performing arts. But then, because the sun is debilitated and it's this debilitated sun is aspecting the 11th house, the the friends might the friends might not be favorable for the native. Okay, or it might it might indicate friends who will be of a lower status, and from a lower class, and maybe also from dishonest families. Okay, and a debilitated sun can make the native take advantage of his network circle for creative ideas and children. However, if the sun is debilitated, then the ego of the native will be overblown, because the fifth house also represents the subconscious. Okay, so such a native will often try to seek control of one's friends and networks. All right, next we come to the sixth house sun. So this is a position of of prosperity, because the sixth house is also the house of, it's also the house of Artha. Okay. And the sun becomes a malefic. Okay. The sun becomes a malefic even if it is in its own sign, or even if it is exalted, because the sixth house, it rules deaths, diseases, social work, you know the routine work that you do in everyday life. Then it represents enemies and obstacles. Okay. So what happens is that the sun, the sixth house sun, will expose the, expose the native's enemies, and it gives a lot of power and authority to the native to overcome the enemies. Okay. And what is the 12th house? The 12th house is the house of spirituality. It's the house of isolation, jails, hospitals, foreign lands. Okay. So if the sun is is in good dignity or exalted, if the sun is in good dignity or exalted, okay, then the native will do charity work related to the government. Okay, charity works related to medicine, because the sun is also a doctor. Okay. However, because the sun is, is aspecting the 12th house, it means that one must serve others selflessly in order to reap the, the results of good karma. Okay. And for these people having the sixth house sun, this mriga mudra is very, very important. Okay, so this is the mudra to serve. Okay, it is a mudra to constantly remind us that we are here to serve. Okay, so serve or be served as food for others. All right. So doing this mudra, for people having sun in the sixth house, it will bring a lot of peace. Okay. However, what happens is that because the sixth house is also the house of obstacles, it also indicates that native may have to go through several obstacles in life in order to gain a spiritual sense of their mission as a human being. Okay. And if the sun is exalted, or if the sun is in Leo, then it can show a great affinity towards work related to serving the underprivileged and the elderly. It is also a combination or a placement for doctors, or it can make a person go into the field of medicine. Okay. But because the sun is aspect in the 12th house, the native may prefer to work in hospitals or in isolation. But if the sun is debilitated, then what happens is the native may be defeated by his enemies, and they may also end up hurting those who are powerless. That means they might try to exert power over the weak. Okay. The native, a debilitated sun may also make the native, have some sadistic pleasures like killing small animals and and getting fun out of it. Okay. And you know such behavior, which is given by a debilitated sun in the sixth house, can actually make the person land up into jail, because the sun is aspecting on the 12th house of imprisonment. Okay. So the native will, when the sun is in the sixth house, the native will have a heavy workload in the public service sector. And in the midst of all this, it would be a great remedy if the native enjoys his time of isolation and also visits foreign places during vacations. Okay. Then comes the sun in the seventh house. So this is again not considered to be a very good placement for the sun, because the seventh house symbolizes marriage, spouse, legal partnerships, the other people, public life, and business. Okay. And since it is the house of Venus, it is the house whose karaka is Venus. So, sun is not considered to be good here. Okay. However, from the seventh house, sun will aspect the first house of the ascendant, which rules the self, the personality, and the body. Okay. And in the seventh house, since the sun is the karaka for personality, in the seventh house, this sun will be dedicated to public life and will love to deal with other people. Okay. But because because the seventh house is the descendant, so the sun is not really happy in this position. Okay. Why? Because it seems that the king has to come down to the marketplace to deal with the public instead of calling them to his royal palace. Okay. So because the sun, because the sun is not comfortable, so this position of sun in the seventh house can produce a very egoistic, very proud, and very self-centered spouse. Okay. In fact, it can produce a very dominating spouse who controls the native due to the sun's aspect on the ascendant. Okay. And the native would have a great desire to rule and dominate others, because the sun is aspecting the ascendant. And this aspect on the ascendant also shows that the native's confidence and ego is derived from other people and their spouse. Okay. So after marriage, the spouse will be the source of increased self-esteem for the native. And just like the sun in the first house, this position of sun can also make the native have a high amount of libido. Okay. And if the sun is exalted, then it can make the spouse come from a very wealthy and respected family. All right. And the spouse can also be a high ranking government official, or maybe an executive in a corporation. And the personality of the native, due to this position, it will be shaped through other people and public life. Okay. And what happens if the sun is debilitated? In that case, the native will always look for a spouse and other types of partnerships to develop their sense of self-esteem and confidence. Okay. So if the sun is debilitated, then the creativity of the native will flourish only through the praises of others, rather than the native having confidence in his or her own work. Okay. So that is the reason, if the sun is debilitated and it aspects the first house, so this debilitated aspect can create low confidence. Okay. The dominating nature is overblown, and it seems that the sun tries to acquire power by looking like a king or by appearing like a king. But internally, because it is debilitated, these people are like sheep. Okay. So this creates a lot of problem in marriage and relationships. Okay. The sun in the eighth house. So this eighth house sun is, it throws light on topics like transformation, okay, secret affairs, and the knowledge of the occult. And from the eighth house, the sun aspects the second house. And in the eighth house, the sun illuminates the darker side of life. And, you know, what happens is the individual will actually either be a revolutionary or can himself become the victim of revolution. Okay. And because it aspects the second house, so this aspect shows the natives hidden family secrets. Okay. And these secrets can actually change the course of the life of a native. All right. And if the sun is exalted in its own house, or in its own sign, then it can show that the ego, confidence, and self-respect of the native can come through hidden sources. Okay. Assets of the spouse and dealing with secrets of other people. Okay. So if the sun is debilitated in the eighth house, so that debilitated aspect on the second house can show some amount of secrecy within the family due to the father, or maybe it can also give a very abusive father whose abuse was hidden in the family. Okay. Then the native will also use secrets of the family against them to gain wealth and assets. It's like blackmailing some family member to gain wealth. Okay. And a debilitated sun can also give problems with the government, okay, with unpaid taxes. It can lead to situations where the government intervenes and takes the assets of the native due to unpaid taxes, through which the family life suffers a lot. Okay. So if the sun is very, very debilitated between 5 to 12 degrees Libra, it shows a very dark personality who stays away from the world. But what happens is that such a person is also very cunning to operate from underground and dominate others. Okay. So this is also the reason why people having debilitated sun in the eighth house, they exert a lot of overconfidence and dominance towards their own family, and these people, they lack the true dignity of the sun. Okay. The sun in the ninth house, so this is considered to be a very good position of the sun, because ninth house is the highest house of higher learning. Okay. House of gurus, house of law, religious scriptures. Okay. It also represents long distance pilgrimage, and also it is the house of luck. So the sun in the ninth house, it aspects the third house of siblings, skills, media, arts, and communication. All right. And because the sun is the karaka for the ego and confidence, so it shows that the confidence and ego of the native, they are massaged by higher learnings and gurus. Okay. But then if the sun is exalted on his own sign, it will show someone who uses higher educations and teachings to develop their confidence and share their knowledge and philosophy with others. Okay. So this sun, this exalted or own house sun in the ninth house can also show taking charge of one's skill set, dominating younger siblings, and communicating as the head of the family to one's close friends and neighbors. Okay. Because it aspects the third house. All right. Now if the sun is debilitated, then it shows someone who may who may run into wrong teachers and gurus, and and receive some wrong knowledge or receive some dangerous knowledge. Okay. And this aspect of the debilitated sun from the ninth house demonstrates that such a person will teach his or her siblings the wrong things in life, okay, which the natives themselves won't realize. And to improve their skill set in the third house, if the sun is debilitated in the ninth house, these natives will use incorrect information, which will again cause a lot of problems to be fixed later on. All right. So next we have the sun in the 10th house. So this is the best position for the sun to be in. Okay, this is called the Digbala of the sun. The sun attains Digbala in the 10th house. And what is the 10th house? It represents career, it represents status, reputation, government, and father. Okay, and you know, there are blessings, and these blessings come when the sun is in the 10th house. Okay, and the sun will be in the 10th house if you are born at the highest point at noon. Okay, so the 10th house is also known as the midheaven, and this sun is very, very strong in terms of power and prestige. Okay, and you know, because it directly aspects the 4th house, it will bring professionalism and egocentric behavior into the home. Okay, so this 4th house aspect, it represents the mother, home, comfort, and the nourishment. And the sun, who is the father, okay, it gives, you know, it gives a very dominating father figure in the mother's life, and it impacts, you know, and such a dominating father figure can impact the decision making ability of the family as a whole. Okay, so what it means is, if someone has sun in the 10th house, then the comfort of the home could be great, but you know, the home might have had very, very strict rules, as you know, as laid down by the father. Okay, so if such a sun is exalted, then its aspect on the 4th house will bring a lot of prestige and higher status. Okay, and the native will want his or her family members to act as if they are part of his kingdom and cabinet. Okay, and the native will also be very, very protective towards your home against any kind of, you know, any kind of difficulties or insults. Okay, and what will happen is that it will bring a sense of righteousness within the home, and the comforts will be, you know, really regal due to the sun's, you know, the sun's aspect on the 4th house. But then these comforts will come at the cost of some very, very strict rules that are required to be followed. Okay, what happens if the sun is debilitated? In that case, the father will cause the comforts of the home to be taken away. Okay, and it can also lead to a lot of, you know, it can also lead to a damaged relationship between the native and the father. Okay, if the sun is between 5 to 12 degrees of Libra. Okay, and it can also cause some career problems to the native, because of which the native can use his excessive power and ego to dominate your family members. Okay, so this demanding nature of the native due to a debilitated sun would eventually impact, you know, one's comfort, home, and mother. Okay, so 11th house sun, again, very, very good position for the sun to be in. It is known as Ekadash Surya, the 11th house. Can, you know, can sun in the 11th house can actually burn and dominate the network circle. Okay, so you know, because the sun aspects the 5th house, so there would be a great interest for the native in politics. Okay, and sun in the 11th house reflects someone who loves making, you know, making connections or making networks in the political world, or with people of high status in the society. Okay, and because this 11th house sun aspects the 5th house, it shows that the native will use network circles and friends to gain political power or leadership. Okay, and the native, such natives have a lot of confidence and also a lot of ego, which actually comes from making connections with influential people. Okay, and if these natives, they don't hang out with influential people, they start feeling weak and unimportant. Right, so if the sun is debilitated, it makes one follow the wrong crowd and network circles. Okay, these people often end up giving poor advice to the children, and they often pursue wrong careers, okay, or wrong education. All right, so that turns out to be a big headache in the end. All right, and because the 5th house is also the house of children, so a debilitated sun in the 11th house can impact relationships of the native with children. Okay, why? Because these people can be very, very dominating, and you know, they can try to involve themselves in each and every activity of the children, which is a big turn off. All right, and the natives would also suffer from a lack of confidence when, you know, when dealing with a huge audience or social event. All right, and all these factors can actually impact the 5th house negatively. Okay, and you know, the native with a debilitated or weak sun would actually derive confidence and ego by engaging with people of high status, yet those people would be charlatans. Okay, so what happens is that through this aspect, the sun actually disregards all the values of the 5th house if debilitated. Okay, so finally we come to the sun in the 12th house. So the 12th house sun is not considered to be good. Okay, because in the 12th house, it is the house of giving away, and the king never wants to give his, you know, the king never wants to give away his kingdom. Okay, so In the 12th house, it means that the sun has lost his throne or has been thrown out from the kingdom. Okay. And because the 12th house represents losses, moksha, spirituality, foreign lands, hospitals, and jails, we can determine how the sun will act. Okay. The sun is our personality, our identity, and our virtue. And the sun in the 12th house shows a lack of or a loss of identity. Okay. And people with displacement can find their ego and confidence in foreign places or in isolation. Okay, so you know a good profession for these people would be to become a foreign government diplomat. Okay, the sun's aspect on the 6th house will also show that the native will deal with a lot of enemies, disease, and obstacles while in foreign lands or in places of isolation. Okay, and if the sun is if the sun is exalted or in a very in its own sign, then it can show a native who manages to deal with obstacles very effectively. Okay, the 6th house aspect of the sun from the 12th house will also show that the native has to work really really hard to find your self-worth, confidence, and balance out the ego. Okay, so how to balance out, they must not be selfish to say no, but try to take up everyday work which is possible. Okay, and if the sun is debilitated, then the other remedies could be to help social groups overcome obstacles with your leadership qualities. Okay, and these people with sun in the 12th house, they are actually good employees in the private or government sector. Okay, and later on these people also get to enjoy life in foreign places or places of peace. All right, and if sun is debilitated between 5 to 12 degrees Libra, it can show several problems with the government and authority, which can lead the natives further in jail. Okay, and if the sun is weak or debilitated, then the natives will actually wander in foreign lands without the ability to find their identity and value until the age of 35. Okay, and the other point with the other problem with the debilitated sun is that the native may have to move to a foreign place due to conflicts with one's own father. Okay, because since the sun is aspecting the 6th house, it actually indicates that the own father might become the enemy of the native. All right, so this was my take on the sun in various houses and how it aspects the 7th house from itself. So I'll see you soon in another video. Go through this video and let me know your valuable feedback in the comment section. And if you want to analyze your chart, or if you want to speak regarding your birth chart, then you're most welcome to reach me at the number given in the description box. All right. So I'll see you soon with another video. Om Gurave Namaha.